we're doing today. I'm glad those of you who were able to make it, made it. If you would go ahead and go through the process of opening the email I sent you guys probably 10 minutes ago, should be near the top of your inbox. It's called Workshop 331 because that's today. What we're going to look at, this is one of your classmates' bibs, 2 of them to be precise. More on that in a minute. Basically, all I want you to do, I chose these bibs for a couple of reasons. Mainly, one of the bibs is going to do a reasonable job of filling you in on their incident, right? All of us, no matter what we're writing about, I keep telling you, you need to focus on an incident. A thing happened. I think the first entry is going to pretty much do that, okay? I had never heard of this before. You may have never heard of this before. But you read that first entry, you get a pretty good sense of what's going on, okay? The second entry of the bibs, again, I think does a reasonable job of presenting one side of the discussion. Because again, ultimately that's our text. The incident itself is not the text, it's the discussion around it, all right? So your job, just for in this moment, read the 2 bibs, and we're gonna try here in a couple minutes to start building a body paragraph out of this information. So take a couple minutes, read over this, we're gonna talk about it. Anybody need more time? Cool. All right. To begin with, I want to talk about these generally, and then we're going to actually get into the sort of specifics, okay? Number 1, as you may have noticed, there's not a lot to go on in these bibs. There's some good things, and we're going to use those. But again, I want to impress upon you, while on the one hand this is homework and you just do it to get your little homework grade, sure. On the other hand, these are for you. These are notes for you. So if you write me shorter, underdeveloped bibs, what you're ultimately doing is you're giving yourself less to work with, right? Just putting that out there. Secondly, though, what are these bibs about? Like, to me, I think we have enough. We can sort of begin to think about what this student might be trying to write about. Like, they say a couple things in these bibs that to me imply this student has some kind of position, some kind of argument they're already kicking around in their head, right? What do you guys think that is? If you had to, and you don't have to put that like into a complete sentence, okay? But like, if you can even just point us to something in the bibs where it's like right here, it seems like they're getting at something, right? What do you think? Yeah, sure.
You can already see they're picking the side and providing evidence that like even like people were saying that it wasn't that meaningful and it wasn't appropriation.
Okay, she's definitely this student is taking issue with the idea that I guess I didn't look up the person, Kezia. They gave us her name at one point, but I don't know anything about her. But apparently she's not Chinese, and she wore a Chinese dress. And people took offense to that. And yeah, our student here seems to take offense to people taking offense to it. Would that be fair to say? Okay. Now, two things about that. Number one, whatever you picked, she picked this, some people picked different movements, other people picked conspiracy theories, like there's all kinds of things, because there's all kinds of crazy shit on the internet, right? All kinds of things to talk about. Whatever you picked, my hope was you would pick something that spoke to you in some way, something you cared about, right? Absolutely. The danger there, though, and this is part of what I want to highlight for you today, the danger there is you're going to write about why you care about it. You see what I'm saying? We're not meant to participate in the conversation. We have to talk about the conversation itself. And that's a subtle difference, but it's an important one, okay? Here's what I mean by that. I agree. This student seems to have a pretty strong opinion about the question of cultural appropriation here and whether or not people should be upset with this girl, right? That's pretty clear. That's not the assignment. That's not the assignment. The assignment is this. It's also pretty clear that people were upset with this girl, okay? We got to think about that. Because that's the world we live in. You may disagree with some aspects of the world we live in, but that doesn't change the world we live in. You see what I'm saying? So we have to talk about the reality of the situation. People call this cultural appropriation, which we'll talk about. If you're not quite sure what that means, we'll talk about that. People took offense to this. Some people did defend her, so we can still talk about that aspect of the conversation. We have to talk about the conversation itself, not the event, okay? And we're going to try to do that now. In an effort to do that now, I believe next time your homework is 2 body paragraphs. So right now you may be saying to yourself, well, I have all these bibs, I have like some thoughts. You just told me some of those thoughts might not be valid, so I'm kind of freaking out. What the hell am I going to write about? How do you write a body paragraph? Does anyone remember how we build those things? Because it hasn't changed, I promise. Some words that start with I, yeah.
I don't remember the words, I just got the 3 I's.
Okay. Somebody remember these? I feel like he might be pulling out his notes. Oh, I'll give you the eyes. I'm not too worried about those. I'm more worried about what they, again, pertain to. Now, here's what really matters. Whether or not you remember the 3 I's, or God help you wrote them down, good job there. You'll notice you're one of the few people going through your notes, which tells you something. Anyway, how do we start a body paragraph? Every time we've written a body paragraph in this class, we have started with one particular thing. And you're going to break my heart if you can't tell me what that thing is. Sure. How do you go about starting that discussion when it comes to building a paper? At least the way I teach it. Where do you start if you're going to talk about a text? Doesn't matter what the text is. I knew you guys were going to break my heart. All right. Think about it like this. I've said at least 1,000 times, like enough times to really annoy you with this sentence, okay? Like you're going to hear it and be like, that thing again. You don't know what you think until you write. You just don't. You have some general, some vague thoughts, right? You lean one way or the other and you figure it out as you go. We've talked about that ad nauseum. So what that means is, usually, when you start a paragraph, whatever you start with isn't actually what you're thinking. You haven't quite uncovered it yet. So start with this guy if you want, but that he has to change almost every time, right? You're going to get more specific. You're going to figure something out. So this really doesn't matter yet. So what do you start with? If you're going to make an argument about a text, if you're going to tell me something about a text, what's the one thing you absolutely have to have before you can do that? I'll help you out. If you were a prosecutor and you were trying to convict somebody of murder, you damn well better have some evidence. You may have arguments all day, but if you have no evidence to back any of that up, then you seem to just have a problem with this guy. Right? You need evidence to make an argument. Because without it, you don't have one. The difference between an opinion and an argument is evidence. So, we need to find some evidence in these bibs. Something we could pull, something we could, at the very least for now, try to use for a body paragraph. Do you guys see anything in here we could maybe talk about, have some thoughts about? Sure.
As evidence?
Yeah.
Let me see, it's all one sentence, the last sentence of the second bib.
Last sentence of the second bib. Oh, so that.
Yep.
Takes a quotation from a Chinese fashion blogger that states, to Chinese, it's not that sacred and it's not that meaningful. And then we have an ellipsis for some reason. Okay. Okay. Well, let's chop that down a little bit for our purposes, and we'll just take that quotation, right? To Chinese. No, I'm not going to write it all up here because we have it in front of us. But I do want to make sure we get, well, I'm going to give you another little quiz real quick. When we quote, why do we quote? Surely you know this one. For language. Thank you. Now here again, we get a little bit of analysis after this quotation. The student tells us, this proves just how over the top some of the users' reactions were to the high schoolers' prom photos. Now we've already talked about, that's sort of her participating in the conversation, right? Defending this girl, as opposed to talking about the conversation itself. So I don't know if we could use that. But beyond that, she's not really talking much about the quotation in terms of its language, right? She's just kind of talking about the idea. Can somebody sum up this quotation in your own words? Could you paraphrase it for us? What is it saying? Something about Chinese people here. According to this fashion blogger, Chinese people feel some kind of way about this. Is your hand up? I can't tell. You're good.
Well, they feel it's not appropriation.
They're not worried about it. Basically, right? That's the idea. Right now we're quoting for that idea. You could just tell me that. But we don't. We have a quotation. We're going to take the student at her word and assume that there's some language in here she likes. We probably need to bring up the Chinese thing, because that seems to be pretty key, right, in this conversation. Okay. Is there any other language in this quotation that seems significant, might be worth talking more about? I'll give you a minute. Again, it's that highlighted section there at the end. I see at least 2 bits of significant language.
It is.
What's up?
I guess to me it's like they were saying that how over the top some of the reactions were from her wearing it.
Yeah, that's what the student says, and and again, we can't do that because we're not participating in the conversation, right? What are we going to focus on in this quotation? We got to take it all the way back to square one. What language are we going to look at from this quotation? I'm not saying you have to tell me why. I just want to know, at the very least, we can pick out, oh, this seems important, this seems important. the loaded language in this quotation? What words seem important?
Like I know when I say it's not that sacred, it's not that meaningful, that's kind of like redundant, but it's kind of emphasizes.
It's emphasis, but it's also, I mean, I wouldn't say they're redundant. To say something is sacred, or in this case not, and to say something is meaningful, those mean two different things. They're related, but what does it mean to say a thing is meaningful? It's full of meaning, literally is what that means. What does it mean to say a thing is meaningful?
It evokes emotion.
It evokes ideas, associations, right? Sure. It can be read into, is what that means, right? Okay. Sacred. Again, related. What does it mean, though, for a thing to be sacred? That's different. What does it mean if a thing is sacred?
That maybe it's rare or something.
Yeah, I mean, sacred things are typically rare, but why? What sorts of things are sacred, even?
I mean, there's like sacred writings.
Like what?
I guess the Mayans' sacred writings things.
Okay, sure.
Holy things.
Weird example, but yeah. Holy things. Things that people consider meaningful, for sure. But it's like a step above that. Like if you burned a holy text, people would, in some parts of the world, fucking kill you. Right? A little stronger than meaningful. So now we're saying, again, both of these are related. Both of these imply that there are thoughts behind this thing, that it means more than you would think on the surface, right? But to say a thing is sacred implies it's like integral to somebody's worldview. You know what I'm saying? That's what sacred is. That's powerful. But of course here, according to this one Chinese blogger, who, granted, has got to know more about Chinese fashion than me, for sure, claims that this dress that this girl wore is not sacred and not that meaningful. Why, might we argue, does she use those words? What is she trying to suggest, address? Like she chooses those words, right? Why do you think she does that?
I guess because like those words get our attention.
Okay. How so? What do you mean by that?
Because I mean, sacred is not really a word that you use, and if you use meaningful, that means it actually means like something more than just being there.
Yeah. Well. Okay. All right. So two things I think you've done there. Number one, in a way, you kind of tied into Sam's point a minute ago, which is we could highlight the fact that this is a sort of emphasis. They don't mean the same thing, but they're related. So in a way, you're kind of repeating yourself to make sure you drive the point home. So there's that. The other thing, though, and I'm trying, because it's just like it's important we quote this. I want to get exactly what you said right. You said something about sacred. You said, can you try to say it again? Why sacred matters? I'm sorry. You said it really well, and I'm gonna not get it right.
Because it's a word that's not used.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. Is sacred a word that's not used very often is kind of what you're saying there, right? You don't hear it too often, right? Why?
Because, I mean, I guess what we're talking about is stuff that we talk about is probably not as sacred.
Not usually very sacred. Hey man, what do you want to do after school? I'm gonna go get something to eat. What do you want to do tomorrow? Probably get something to eat too. Not very sacred. Okay. Well then, what are we, again, implying, if that's kind of our bar, we're saying the usual everyday sort of life you lead doesn't seem to include many sacred things. What are we, perhaps, according to this person, saying about this dress? Go ahead.
It really doesn't mean anything.
Well, I mean, it means something because we just defined it. What is it in this context, the way we're talking about it? What does it mean to say a thing is not sacred? That means it's what?
That's probably just a thing. But-
Just an everyday
Yeah.
thing. Right?
Right.
It's a fucking dress. Would be another way to say that. Right? For sure. Okay. It's an everyday item. It's just not, again, that meaningful, not that full of, I don't have another way to say it, meaning, I guess. Well, now we can get a little deeper, I think. These are good places to start. We can think more about, especially that's, well, in either term, really. Why say it's not those things? And what I mean by that is you're kind of arguing, you're suggesting that you have to disprove the idea that it is sacred, that it is meaningful. Do you see what I'm saying? Why do you think this Chinese blogger felt it necessary to make that point?
So they would stop giving the girl that wore hate.
Sure, but what we're kind of doing is suggesting, this Chinese blogger is suggesting the people who are hating on this high schooler are doing it for a reason that involves these words, I guess.
Because they're they're describing something that is, like, the blogger knows more about it than the rest of them, and
Then a lot of them for sure, probably.
yeah, and the other people were trying to kind of just describe it in the wrong way or blow it out of proportion or something. She was trying to like rein it back in. Like,
Describe it in what way? We have to be as precise as we can. What does this language imply that this Chinese blogger is implying about the way these people are talking about this dress?
they were seeing it of this just like on a mass proportion, like it was this super like sacred thing.
It was a holy item.
Yeah.
Something that, again, every culture has sacred objects. If you disrespect that culture's sacred object, they will react accordingly, right? It's usually not good. But she's claiming here, she's implying here that that's what's going on, right? She never says that. But that's the inverse of her statement. Like, that is the implication. That's what we got to talk about. You see what I'm saying? That's how you talk about the conversation itself. One side of the debate is, stop hating on this girl for wearing this dress that she found and she wore because she claimed she liked it. That all seems pretty innocent, pretty high school, right? And this person on that side of the debate kind of looks back at the other side and says, you're treating it like this when you shouldn't be. So not only is it an everyday item, she tells us it is not basically it's not this foundational piece of Chinese culture, is what she's telling us, right? And again, to be totally fair to the other side, I would have no idea. I would have no idea what is foundational to Chinese culture. I am not a Chinese person. I can find it on a map. That's about it. And even then, if you have me draw the borders, I would mess that up, right? We don't know. But that's kind of what she's telling us. Now, what becomes interesting, because we still haven't, we've only started with this quotation. I think we got some pretty good sort of traction here, right? Now what we got to do is think about how we can apply this material, our analysis, to our question, which is, what does any of this, the fact that this conversation is happening, what does it tell us about us as a people, a society, a culture? Okay? What does that mean in this context? In this paragraph, I think what we're driving at is, what's an argument we can make about us when apparently a person from the culture that we're defending, okay, says this about our defense? It can tell us a number of things, by the way. It's not just one thing. Your hand up, I can't tell. Go for it.
People with not a lot of knowledge on a subject will try to jump into an argument, they'll try to argue something that they have nothing to do with, or they don't have enough knowledge on.
Okay, yeah, okay, so, one idea, and I'm just gonna, hopefully we'll have a short list going, but I'm gonna use we. Well, no, I don't want to mislead you. I don't know how best to get around that. Anyway, but yeah, people, as you say, tend to chime in with little to no knowledge of what they're talking about. Right? Is that a fair argument to make, do you think? You guys are like, yeah. Some of you on Twitter right now, they're like, yeah, that's what that guy's doing. Sure, we do that. We do that all the time. We would have to see how this looks as a paragraph. This sort of an idea could be enough, maybe, for a single body paragraph. I'd like to know if you guys can think of any other alternatives, though. I'm just curious. There's two ways to go about it, by the way. We can either wonder, again, what this information says about us, okay? Or, something you can always do, and I do this to you guys, I know you love it. Why? Why do we do this, do you think? Chime in with little to no knowledge. What does it say about us that we do that?
We just want to be in an argument just to be in it.
To me, that's too simplistic. That's circular, right? You're saying we do a thing because we do a thing. Instead of that, because again, it's not just we're arguing, right? We are saying in this paragraph, we get into arguments with like basically no knowledge of what we're arguing about, right? What does it say about us that we do that? Because again, when we wrote this on the board and I kind of gestured to you guys, most of you like nodded. You're like, yeah, we totally do that.
I guess we try to show people that we have more knowledge than we do.
We're pretending.
Yeah.
Maybe. All right, so here again, so now we know we're in the realm, once we take that next, I guess we could say step 1, step 2, step 3, once we take that next step after the argument we all agree with, now we're into a territory we have to defend. You see what I'm saying? We're pretending we know more than we actually do, perhaps. Perhaps. You would have to use what you've said here as a starting point to convince me of that idea, right? I think you could. That's what makes an argument, okay? But there's other possibilities, right? So for instance, again, why else could you argue maybe we chime in with little knowledge, little to no knowledge?
People are quick to argue.
Why do you think that is? Because, I mean, again, if it helps, try to, you want to try to keep your discussion to what we're talking about, right? So I know in a way you're saying in general, and that's true maybe, but we're talking about this. So why do these people chime in with little actual knowledge of Chinese culture, do you think?
We talked about Monday about how a lot of people, especially on the internet, strive to just be part of part of these arguments when it's kind of not their place in a lot of cases.
There is a conversation here about, and I hate to put it that way because it sounds pejorative, right?
Yeah.
But like, when is it your place to even defend someone? Like that, isn't that a weird idea to have? Like, it may not always be your place to defend somebody.
There's like a fine line to know when it is and when it's not.
It's hard to know,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's why it's like a kind of shaky argument.
Well, I'm not even sure how to sum that up, but it's different, right? It's different enough to be its own argument. Like this idea that, again, we as a people are like so given to defense. I have a question about that, but we're so given to defense that we will maybe even be super wrong sometimes, at least again according to this person, in our defense of those people, right? Chinese people hate this. Meanwhile, this Chinese person is like, I don't think we care. That's kind of interesting, because we do that. All right. So I'm going to leave it at this. There are more, but again, on the one hand, I just want to show you that if you take things far enough, one of the ways you know you're in the realm of a really good argument is that you have options. Now you're going to feel strongly about one of those options. That's probably the one you roll with. But the fact that there are options means you have to defend your position. That defense of your position, that's your argument, that's your analysis, okay? So to bring it all the way back now to the top. The reason, again, you cannot know what you really think before you write is look at what we just did. There's no way you guys would have come out of the gate with one of those ideas, right? Based on this evidence, you get to this, that takes work. But we've done the work now. Now we can try to figure out a topic sentence. Oh, what time is it, by the way? Oh, we're made of time. Wait, when do we get out of here? Oh yeah, we're made of time. Okay, we're almost done, I promise, with this. Does anyone recall, and again, you may break my heart here, that's okay. But we talked about how to build a topic sentence, like a proper topic sentence. Anybody remember? It's got 3 parts to it. You don't even care that you break my heart, do you? You're like my first girlfriend out of high school. Thought you cared. She didn't care. She may have, I don't know. I certainly don't. All right, anyway. It goes like this. All right. I always write it like this because who and what? Who is your subject? That's not always a person, by the way. I apologize for who maybe being a little misleading there. But whatever noun you are considering, that's your subject, that's your who, okay? What is what that thing is doing? You need these first 2 to have a sentence at all, right? That's how sentences work. You need a thing doing something. The other good news for you guys, 2/3 of your topic sentence is observation, is summary. What are we looking at in the paragraph, and what is it doing? So let's start there. This is the hard part. We're not even doing that yet, okay? In this paragraph, if I ask you, what are we looking at and what is that thing doing? What should you be focused on? What are you going to tell me about in some way, shape, or form? This is not argument, right? This is just summary. What summary are we offering in this paragraph?
I guess how like some people in the internet took the Chinese dress the girl was wearing at prom in the wrong way, and one of the Chinese people that wrote, what is it?
That quotation?
Yeah.
It's not saying it's not me. So what we're going to focus on is our evidence.
Right.
Because again, understand this. If all you ever do is tell me what your evidence is, that's summary. You need a little bit of that. Can somebody help me frame specifically our subject and what our subject is doing if we're going to describe our evidence? We can start backwards if you like, because we did this already. Can someone paraphrase that quotation? What is it, like in your own words, what is it saying?
It doesn't matter much to them.
Not a big deal. Yeah, I've lost. Okay. That's 1/3 of our topic syllabus. How do we glean that information? How do we learn, apparently this dress is not a very big deal?
The blogger saying
Yeah, I was like, come on guys, you gotta have this one. Chinese blogger. You can say Chinese perspective if you want, although it's kind of, you get yourself into trouble maybe saying one Chinese person sums up all Chinese thought, but anyway. Yeah. This Chinese blogger tells us that apparently this dress is not a very big deal. So far, we have a sentence, but all we have is summary, right? Okay. Now, the third part, which is the slightly trickier bit, but this is argument. Let's take the first one, because we can take either of these, but let's take the first one. What we sort of said at the end of our discussion a couple minutes ago was one of the reasons we chime in with little to no knowledge is that we for some reason or another, is it that we like to pretend we know more than we do? Is that kind of what we're trying to say? Okay. Now here's the important part. Right now, granted, these are just notes. That's basically a sentence, right? Chinese blogger tells us the dress is not actually a big deal, which suggests that we pretend to know more than we do. That's a topic sentence. That's an argument. Well, one critique here would be, I think we could be slightly more specific. So humor me on this. We pretend to know more than we do about what? Because we're not saying everything, right? What are we talking about in this paragraph? What are we going to claim that we like to pretend we know more than we do about this one thing? What is that one thing in this paragraph?
other people's culture.
Other cultures. Is that fair? Yeah, I think we do. Cool. That's an interesting argument. And again, how did we build it? We started with the evidence. And we took it the right way, which is to say, we're not participating in the conversation. I know most of you on some level want to do that. That's why you chose whatever you're talking about. But that's not the assignment, okay? That cannot be what we do. So instead, we took it as, well, what does this tell us about the conversation that's going on, about the people that are participating within it? We worked with the quotation. We got to this one idea, which you all seem to pretty much agree with, which on the one hand also tells me it's a little bit banal, so we need to go further. Why do we do that? Well, we came up with two options. For the sake of time, I didn't push you any further, right? And we rolled with one of those, and we made it into a topic sentence. That's a body paragraph. Every time. That's how you write them. Every time. Focus on some kind of evidence that seems significant to you. Pick it apart. Make an argument. I'll say 85% of the time, whatever argument you arrive at initially is going to be a little bit banal. So get more specific. Ask yourself questions like, well, why do we do this thing, right? Usually there's a more specific argument, which is much less banal, requires more proof. Now you have a topic sentence. Questions about any of that? Okay. Good. What I want you to do now then is 10:11. I will let you out a little early, not right now, but I will let you out a little early so long as you get some work done. Like I said at the top of class, you have 2 body paragraphs that are due. You want to start on those, given what we just did, I would encourage that. If you're not quite at this stage, maybe you have more research to do, whatever, do that. Use this time constructively for your future self. If everybody does a good job, we'll go home a little early. Get to it.